Yeah, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Belvedere online and on-site to our 32nd networking event of DArtHist Austria. Networking event, kind of funny because the original idea, I guess, was that people come together physically, but this time we should have more people online in the world than here physically at the Belvedere. But great that you joined. And I obviously have to make some promotion for DArtHist Austria, which is the network for digital art history in Austria. As it says, we are promoting collaboration on digital issues, exchanging ideas, and so on. And for that, we do pretty much once a month an event to discuss a project that is relevant in the field. I should also mention, obviously, that you can become a member of DArtHist. Just go online. There is a website, and you will see how to register. Then we still have a call open for the DArtHist Award. It's the second time that we are able to award a digital project, may it be a master's thesis or something more practical. You also find all the necessary information, relevant information on the website. And for the ones who are already members, I should mention a save the date on July 1st. We will have our summer get together, so please stay tuned. Another announcement, the last lecture that we had here with by Koen Brosens can now be actually listened to at our YouTube channel. So if you missed the last occasion, you can still hear what Professor Brosens did tell us about slow digital art history. And now to our event today. You guys who are online, you can always post your questions in the chat, please. And I'm very happy that Sandra van Ginhoven of the Getty Research Institute agreed to come to us tonight. She is currently head of the Getty Provenance Index, been since 2018 when I left her with a big mess because I was her predecessor with the project of the Getty Provenance Index. And she, to this date, was working hard to fix the mess that I left her to transform the Getty Provenance Index into linked open data. She has a background in economics and a PhD in art history from Duke University, and her research focus is very much on art markets between southern Netherlands and Spanish America during the 16th century. That was her dissertation, which was published at the Brill series, Studies in the History of Collecting and Art Markets, which I'm also editing. And she became really an expert in linked open data, and the new provenance index was only launched, I think, a month or so ago, beginning of May. And Sandra also told me that she did not yet really present what the new provenance index is, what it is able to do. And that's why I feel very honored that we are having her here. I'm also very interested because I remember when I started my job with the Getty Provenance Index, I went to Duke University and you were still a graduate student and you had some ideas what the Provenance Index should do. And I still have these notes where you said it should have a show me button. Now I'm really curious whether you implemented the show me button in the latest installment of the Provenance Index. So please welcome Sandra van Ginhoven.
Thank you, Christian. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks to DArtHist Austria also. Like Christian mentioned, this is the first time presenting the remodel of the Provenance Index since we launched. And we do have, of course, plan starting in the summer of outreach and trainings and sharing with all our community. But this is the first time, and thank you for the invitation. Thank you to everyone on Zoom joining us today. I think what Christian was referring to this show me button, but how I first approached the Provenance Index as a grad student was indeed to think about big questions that we can ask from provenance data. So, in many ways, the remodeling of the Provenance Index speaks to that opening up in terms of uses. It's a work in progress still. We are, as you will hear today, we've launched a new platform. DArtHist is an open source platform. And it's a new data model. And this is the time now to start going out and reach our many types of users, many user communities everywhere, and think about the ways in which we want to incorporate this into the new platform. Because as linked open data, we are entering now new networks, new communities, new types of uses of data, and it's our opportunity to think about what provenance research now is in the 21st century. But with these words, let me begin by also stating in May, the beginning of May, we released two of the main data sets of the Provenance Index, the sales catalogs and dealer stock books, in the DArtHist platform. And I already mentioned it's the end of a milestone for us, but it's also, like I said, really a new beginning. It's very an exciting beginning for us, and because of the opportunities it provides to build a knowledge base about provenance of artworks and to explore really different modes of engagements with linked data in a collaborative way. No new data has been added. Rather, the data is available in a new structure that consolidates information and makes connections explicit. And the data has been, like I mentioned, changed, improved in structure, cleaned and reconciled. But this new structure means that work of enrichment and refinement is ongoing. So with this, I also invite everyone to send us your feedback or any further connections that haven't made explicit yet. We have a form, and I have that at the end of the presentation. As most of you might know, for decades, the Provenance Index has been making available to researchers this information from source documents, mentioned sales catalogs, dealer stock books, and archival inventories that describe ownership or transfers of ownership of art since roughly the 16th century, with a strong focus on European and American paintings. And the history of the GPI, as it will call it henceforth, has been both a history of provenance research, but also of the technologies underlying this field of study. So with that, I wanted to go through a brief history of the GPI. It started in 1974, originated in the paintings department of the Getty Museum, with two book projects, a census of Italian paintings in American public collections and an index to paintings sold in the British Isles in the 19th century. It was in 1981 the project became known as the Provenance Index and constituted of multiple indices of European sales catalogs and archival documents. The first GPI databases date to the mid-80s, and these databases were published as the book some of you see on the right. The Provenance Documentation Collaborative was formed in 1990 to foster international projects for the production and enrichment of the databases and kicked off many of the collaborations lasting to this day. And in 1994, the department produced the first CD-ROM, and this is what you see on the right, top right, is the cumulative edition of 1999. So it was in 1996 that the Provenance Index was published online, replacing the CD-ROM version and making it available to a wider audience. That's almost 30 years ago. From 2005, the GPI has partnered with many institutions in Europe, such as the INHA, the Fondazione di Venezia, the National Gallery in London, and others, as well as with many individual researchers and teams of scholars, which resulted in new inventories and sales data added to the database online, as well as other data sets such as payment to artists in 16th and century Rome with Richard Spear, and many other collaborations. Some of them have resulted in publications such as Display of Art in Roman Palaces, London and the Emergence of the European Art Market, and more recently Money in the Air, This last facilitated by the digitization and addition of the Goupil and Knoedler stockbooks data into the Provenance Index, thus adding private sales information to the public records of sales and inventories. Starting in 2013, optical character recognition technology was integrated in a transcription workflow with the German sales project in collaboration with the University of Heidelberg and the Berlin Museum Libraries and other German institutions, which led to adding data from over 800,000 individual sales for the 1900 to 1945 period in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And with this project, this addition of new technologies really brought a different kind of scale, an unprecedented sense of scale in the manner of how technology was impacting the workflows for data management and curation, hinged on computational technologies. In 2016, we began the work to remodel the GPI as linked open data, first focusing on assessing the data and the editorial practices over 4 decades, which resulted in really a monumental work of data cleaning, reconciling, and restructuring. While doing this work, we began releases of the raw data as CSV files on GitHub alongside data dictionaries to improve access to the databases, benefiting from the data cleaning and reconciliation as part of the project, and stimulate its uses at a larger scale than was possible via the online interface. In 2020, and not towards our objective of breaking data silos and to introduce the idea of main resource types, we released a unified search interface across the 2.2 million records of sales, inventories, and dealer stockbooks, organizing the search interface around people, organization, objects, events, and documents. But the data in itself remains siloed. So by 2016, it had become necessary to bring the GPI into a new future-proof system to replace the software adopted in the 80s. The existing platform was based on a proprietary technology, developed over 40 years ago, and it was starting to reach the point where we were thinking about its sustainability in terms of from a technical standpoint. So it was decided to take advantage of this necessary data migration to move to an open source platform with a new data structure that would expand the uses of the GPI, making the data both human and machine readable and available to broader communities. It is Getty's commitment to sustain this important resource, and these changes will help ensure its longevity and durability. At the same time, the field of provenance had been evolving and expanding in the questions scholars and the public were asking from provenance data, questions that went beyond the individual object to address patterns in collecting and the mechanisms underpinning circulation and translocation of artworks in different contexts. The projects and publications I mentioned previously as examples testify to this expansion. And of course, we need to consider the increasing interest in questions of provenance related to the formation of museum collections and issues related to repatriation that are now part of public debates and reparation conversations with indigenous and local communities. Therefore, we approach the remodel as the opportunity to dive deep into the data and its potentials and rethink how the GPI could not only facilitate current research, but also stimulate new questions and take an active stance on provenance research in the 21st century. And these are big goals, and they continue to really drive the work. And yet again, the answer to these questions and charting a path forward is something we need to do as a community. So the first step for us was to release the data in this new structure and start exploring what this could mean as a community. So what does the GPI offer? We are introducing a new way of expressing provenance data, structuring it with meaning so that it can enable new forms of scholarship. This new structure really makes visible the incredible richness of knowledge captured in the database, which is the result of decades of research starting by Burton Fredrickson and his team in the 70s and continued by GPI staff over the last 4 decades in collaboration with international scholars and institutions. Despite the rich information contained in each GPI record, the flat structure of the datasets in the legacy platform made it hard to see the connections between various transactions or to trace the history of a single object as it changed over hands. And the new Provenance Index revealed these exchanges in one place. Multiple records related to a particular artist or works are consolidated in single resource views, and the new data structure makes it possible to be explicit about the relationships between resources. Now we can connect people to objects and people to people in ways that weren't possible before, and these connections are the starting point of new connections that anyone can explore, and this is continuous work for the GPI team as new connections are possible or emerge from the ongoing research and reconciliation work. Data curators have made important updates to the core data, most importantly, the alignment to field-wide standards like the Getty vocabularies, using the union list of artist names, the art and architecture thesaurus, and the geographic names means that the shared terminology makes searching easier across sources, and our name authority resources for artists, collectors, dealers, which had previously been used only for internal reconciliation purposes, are now publicly available. Beyond generic search terms, the new GPI can be queried in precise ways using advanced searches that leverage the new data model and via multiple access points, such as an API, which allows other systems to access the data directly, and anyone can also query using a language called Sparkle. All of this means that we have been constructing a future-proof technology to ensure the longevity and durability of the GPI, which also means that we can connect the data in the Provenance Index to other resources at Getty, but also outside the institution, and thereby drawing broader connections and leading to new discoveries that may have been obscured in its previous form. These are a few examples of concrete difference that users will observe, and we know that the new structure of the GPI is complex. The ArtHist platform is new not only for you, but also for us at Getty. The challenge and opportunity too behind this work was to facilitate both traditional art historical methods and new, more computationally driven approaches to provenance research. Those of you who know me, like Christian, know that bridging both has been a major driver also in my own career as an art historian. So it will be really important in the months to come to collaboratively work on garnering feedback on how users are using this data or what kinds of questions you are all asking, and work on ways, think about together ways to facilitate how the interface can facilitate that, and also in the presentation of the search results. So I mentioned the introduction sessions and training sessions that we're organizing, and we're really exciting to really excited to start working with all our community. Since its origins, the GPI was predicated on replicating the source document, but remodeled as linked open data means that we model what is described in those source documents, and we publish resources and identify them via unique resource identifiers or URIs to make them findable and linkable. We describe the relationships between resources using another shared standard for semantic data called CDOC-CRM, conceptual reference model, developed by museum professionals, by an International Committee for Documentation of the International Council of Museums, to be specific. This follows an event-based model, and more specifically to linked art, a profile of CDOC-CRM developed by the American Art Collaborative, which is an association of several museums and research institutions worldwide. So in essence, and to be very, very schematic here, the sale of an object at auction can be illustrated, as shown in this diagram, by the sale of the event in the center, organized by an auction house where a seller and a buyer exchange ownership of an object that is created by an artist, and all of this is documented in a written source, such as an auction catalog entry with hand annotations on the margin. This means that what was presented as a record that consolidated the information transcribed from a source and some extra research conducted to clarify the artist, seller, and buyer identities, assign object types, and other contextual information in the legacy platform is now presented as a set of resources, what is known about them, and how they relate. So let me walk you through a concrete example of what this transformation entails. In their stock books, dealers record the paintings, Dealers record the paintings they purchased and sold alongside the details of the work and the transactions. And I will focus on the row highlighted in orange. Here you see an entry in Stockbook 10 of the New York Knoedler Gallery. You can read that John Singer Sargent's painting Girl in White Muslin Dress, and I'm focusing here on the right side of the entry, was sold on April 16 on 1957 to Ernest Closuit for $2,200. We took the semi-structured information in the GPI, the same structure that has been in place in the 1980s, and worked with semantic specialists and data engineers working in the museum and cultural heritage fields, as well as content experts, to present both the information contained in the source and structure it in a way that describes the event, in this case, the acquisition by Closuit, and establish connections between objects and people that are captured in the data. The annotation on the row on the left shows ON, that stands for old numbers, and a string of numbers. So that tells us that before the Knoedler Gallery sold Girl in White Muslin Dress to Ernest Closuit, the painting was actually recorded under different stock numbers and titles, as they purchased and sold the painting 3 times between 1921 and 1957. For the remodel, it was crucial to express events at the object level. So part of the work in this case involved gathering from the annotations in the stock books, such as this one, and a concordance of all the numbers recorded for each of the 20,000 objects recorded in the 11 stock books of the Knoedler Gallery. And it took one staff member a whole year to gather this information. But all this allowed to piece together this information that was previously missing. So in doing so, and here is the resource page for that object painting Girl in White Muslin Dress, we can gather in one place information available in the GPI for this artwork, and as a result, one of the previous titles given to the work helps identify the sitter as Mrs. Anstruther Thompson. And you can see a little below the different stock numbers brought together under the identifier section. A second example of the consolidation and connection enabled by the new structure is this painting by Judith Leister, currently at the National Gallery in Washington. Prior research by GPI editors identified that the painting had been offered at auction as by Franz Hals 4 times in the early 19th century, in July 1810, March 1811, April 1811, and June 1812. In this record from our legacy database, which describes the June 1812 sale, this knowledge was recorded as encoded text, string text under previous sales. While this information is listed, there is no explicit connection between the related events. The researcher needs to manually locate all 3 sales and piece it all together outside the platform. In ArchES, there is one object resource for the painting under the Data tab, which is highlighted in orange. We find the information about the painting, and you can see here all the titles brought together, and in this case, the identifiers across sales, in this case, lot numbers. And under the Data tab, the events listed as the previous sales are now uniquely identified provenance activities connected to the object. And this is in the related resources view of the painting highlighted in orange. Below that, you can also see the 4 overall auction events where this painting was offered at sale. This is not an isolated development. I would like to call attention to the fact that there are at least 48,000 entries in the Provenance Index that record a previous and post-sale. Now, objects appearing and reappearing at auctions over time in itself is very common, and we now have the means to encode this information in the data structure as a knowledge base for research and scholarship henceforth. What I have described in these examples is the transformation of a few entries as captured in the old system, and the team worked on data cleaning and reconciliation that I have mentioned, so that over 2 million entries recorded in the GPI provide the backbone for what we call the resources, each object, each actor, each event mentioned in each source document, and the type of relationship among them, which brings an increased fidelity of the provenance information for users. The provenance is encoded in a manner that supports both the method of research through textual works or document sources and a new event-based focus that brings relationships between all these resources. The shift in how provenance data is described and subsequently queried is complex, and the task of presenting that shift will need to be continually refined. And I would like to briefly expand on some of these via another example based on the sale of the painting collection of the Duc d'Orléans, one of the most important events in the history of collecting and a major cultural phenomenon at the time. Many here will know the history of the collection and that after the sales organized in London in the 1790s, the works were spread as they changed owners and traveled across borders. Many of them now are featured in major museums around the world. The Orléans sales have been extensively researched and written about, so we are not presenting here nor pointing to new research. Rather, the Provenance Index team focused on a few examples from the sale of the Orléans Italian pictures to start exploring capabilities of the new system and data structure to be able to visualize shared histories of ownership of objects at a larger scale and across data that was previously siloed. The examples here are the Death of Adonis by Paolo Veronese and Venus and Adonis by Titian that had previously been in the collection of Christina, Queen of Sweden, and now are at the National Museum in Stockholm and at the Getty Museum. The current location of the third, Saint's Rock Kneeling Before the Virgin by Annibale Carracci, is unknown, but appeared in a Berlin sale of 1912 organized by the Lepke Auction House, sale which is included in the German sales database. And by including the connection to this later sale, I am also pointing here to the type of enhancement that will continue to be possible as future more connections will emerge. In Arches, I showed that, as in the previous example of the Franz Hals painting, the provenance information can be exposed on an object-by-object basis, and also built via a data visualization tool native to Arches. Here I'm showing objects created by Veronese from the Orléans sale. And this is a functionality that will be really extremely interesting to explore with users going forward. And furthermore, the Sparkle endpoint in Getty's linked open data or LOD gateway provides opportunities to really produce user-generated slices of the provenance index data. And as a proof of concept, this query returns paintings by Carracci, Titian, and Veronese sold at the 1798 Orléans sale, each subsequent buyer mentioned in the provenance index and the current owner of each painting. Using this slice of information, the GPI staff, aided by Giulia Taurino, also from the GPI, generated the above visualization that begins to chart the outward flow of objects in the Orléans sale, focusing on works from these three artists. Starting at the left, splitting into three distinct groups, are paintings by Carracci in green, Titian in red, and Veronese in blue that were sold at that sale. The bulge in the middle lists each painting and traces their movement from that sale to their first buyer as listed in the index. And as the flow of objects move to the right, subsequent buyers of paintings are mentioned in the index are shown, eventually leading to their current location on the right, with Veronese traveling to the National Museum in Stockholm, Titian to the Getty Museum, and the Carracci to the largest group, which are objects with no known current location. What I find most exciting about this prototype is that visualizations like these can be replicated for any sale mentioned in the GPI and provide meaningful new ways to communicate provenance information that is increasingly important to researchers and general public. So while the Orléans sale represents a well-documented event in the history of collecting, it allows us to start showcasing potential new avenues for expressing any provenance events and indeed demonstrate that what shared provenance can contribute to our broad histories of art. And furthermore, because the data model of the index conforms to standards increasingly used by museum collection pages like the Getty and others, it's theoretically possible that a query and visualization like the one shown can be created from data across institutions, pulling in more information to further enrich our understanding of the provenance of these objects. This last point brings to the discussion that the remodel is part of a broader strategy to build a holistic digital ecosystem at Getty. This strategy has been to operationalize the use of linked data, using the community-driven startup LinkedArt to create a consistent, connected, and collaborative digital environment. It's taken some time, but Provenance Index now uses the same underlying data structure that we use for Getty's art collection, the museum pages, and the Research Institute's research collections viewer, RCV Online, that includes the GRI dealer archives and other special collections. Getty also offers a link art representation of the Getty vocabularies, and it's how we make all this data available via our APIs. So having the same underlying structure across Getty data provides the opportunity to link across data sets, enriching what we know about our data and our history, both internally and externally with other organizations. Cultural heritage institutions are in the midst of fundamental technical changes with the adoption of frameworks such as IIIF to streamline the delivery and management of images, as well as the maturation of the use of ontologies such as linked art and systems such as arches to move linked open data from experimental to operational. In our work, we're committed to leveraging these new ways of delivering collection and interpretative data to our research, public, and computational audiences. Our aim is to connect content, data, and digital assets to be consistently created, managed, connected, and made publicly accessible using community-adopted standards. And as part of this, an example is linked art, which Getty participates with over 20 cultural heritage institutions in its development. Other institutions like Yale Lux Discovery System and the Rijksmuseum New Collection are two additional examples of this implementation. This is another example of partnering with other institutions to experiment this cross-linking of our data to realize the full potential on this interoperability. This is an example I wanted to bring up because we can't wait to explore what this all means and looks. And this is something that was developed in Amsterdam last year by colleagues at Getty Digital to explore what it would mean to bring GPI data from ULAN, from museum collections and Wikidata. Again, just this prototype of saying, can we do this? And it's proven to be a very exciting pathway forwards as we continue thinking about how we can leverage from the new linked data cloud. So where we are, as I mentioned, the sales catalogs and dealer stock books have been available since the beginning of May. Archival inventories, which is our third big data set in the GPI, will be brought to Arches, we hope by next year. And that means that we are in this period of transition. So the legacy site will remain available for the time being as we fully transition data, but also our users to working in the new interface. Arches in itself being an open source platform, it has a large community of developers, of cultural heritage institutions, all thinking through shared challenges. We're starting this June with training sessions that will continue on, and also as we develop new functionalities and as we garner feedback. We do have a feedback form, and I will show everyone where to find it so that we can gather user experience information from our users. And like I mentioned, we have this ongoing plan of finding ways to make it easy to engage with the community. I think that's also a new model in this more community-driven work. What's coming? Of course, there will be new data sets coming in the future once we have data ingestion and contribution workflows. For example, we have been working on American sales auction catalogs data, so that is kind of in the pipeline, if you will. I mentioned data contribution and linking workflows, and that is also a shared challenge with other projects, other institutions as well. So it's another area where not only on the putting content out side of things, but really thinking about ways to make this available, being part of a larger conversation about how to do that, because working with linked data in this it's also very new. We have plans to, of course, think through the user interface, because now we're using the Arches platform, and as it's in ongoing development, we might be able to update the user interface in the future. And I mentioned community engagement, and I think that's a really interesting and exciting model for us as we really go out and start participating in other conversations respected to linked data. And I wanted to also acknowledge the team that has been behind the remodel of the Provenance Index, the Getty Provenance Index team at the Research Institute, our colleagues in Getty Digital, external partners in Tagging Solutions and Advanced Service, and Farallon Geographics, the developers of Arches. And as well, all the people that have been part of this journey along the way. And I would like to give you here the links to send us interest in providing feedback or in knowing more about the new GPI, and the email address of the department. I'll leave it on for a little bit, and I wanted to thank everyone for your attention and for being with me through the slides this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this presentation of the brand new Getty Provenance Index. People online, please post your questions in the chat. That's all very fascinating after such a long journey of almost 10 years in the making. And we also recently saw this slide, how many people were eventually involved in this project. Provocative, what took you so long? What were really the challenges? Because for other institutions like us, a lot of institutions are very excited by the possibilities of linked open data, of smashing the silos, of getting connected to other data repositories. But we always feel overwhelmed. And if the Getty needs so much, that has so much resources, it takes so long. So will it get any faster? Were the particular challenges with the Provenance Index?
I think it will definitely will get easier. I think a lot of going through the process. We were at Getty, we were the first ones, for example. So just building that knowledge base, exposure to linked data. There weren't that many when we started. There weren't that many, interfaces that we could necessarily. There were, of course, but connected to our area, there were probably very, very little. Linked Dart, now it's reached a very stable moment with the release of 1.0. We were understanding the model. I think we really were, it was very challenging, but I think we were kind of learning everything at the same time, learning even new tools to how to clean, reconcile data at a scale. I think 10 years ago, we discovered Open Refine along the way, and that was not necessarily right there at the beginning. We had to learn all that. We had to learn so many new skills, all of us, really. So I think that we now being in the process of putting out there the documentation or experience, refining that documentation, also being able to showcase in a very practical way what it means to structure data in that way, what you can do. I think all of that will make it easier. Another example for the developer side of things is a package now that colleagues at Getty Digital and Tagging Solutions have released about a package of arches loaded with linked art models. So there are many ways in which I think collectively an institution and with other people we're thinking through how to make it easier. Even Sparkle, that Sparkle language. I think there's a shared desire and a lot of talent out there to really make it more accessible, increasingly accessible as a querying language. So I think there are different examples of how this can get easier. And as we have more data also, or more platforms that are doing this to really show what it means and what are the potentials. So I think that's also changed along the time. But it was certainly, as you will remember too, it was a big challenge. I think approaching the provenance index, it's an amazing product that has been there for decades and extremely used, and how to look at it and look at editorial practices, standards that have also evolved over 40 years. So how can we approach that and apply a new structure? That was in itself also very challenging. But
yeah, from the quantitative side, it's very impressive because the information stayed the same, but initially there were 2 million records and now there are 12 million resources. So that's a huge success. But I'm just could you tell us a little more about what the learning was on this experiment with putting together like museums data, wiki data, provenance index, because that's really where I hope that we see things that help us to convince leadership in our institutions that we should go towards linked open data, because suddenly we can enrich our data so much. I mean, my dream is always to connect our provenance index, provenance data in a museum's database with the source documents that are in the provenance index. If that comes together, that's immensely powerful also for the provenance index, because suddenly you have images. There was always this criticism that the provenance index is all text, there are no images, but you could get the images from the museums if you can connect with the provenances. How will that work, and what did you learn from this experiment that you just showed?
It was really great to see that it's a prototype that worked, because it really consolidates all that information. Like you saw on that screenshot, it brought images, it brought information about the buyers, about the institution, some historical information to even translate prices to current US dollars, for example. So it was quite successful. I think it does highlight the fact that, we all need to reconcile this data to, say, for example, ULAN, to use this practice of unique identifiers. It's a huge data work. It involves content specialists too. There's a lot of research that really goes into making this possible, and I think that cannot be underestimated. When we see some results, we might think, oh, great, the data is ready and needs to be just push a button and then you have all this, but it does require tons of research, making that research, documenting that, making it accessible, also in ways that others can use it, and also working together with, cross-disciplinary. This is not something that I can do as an art historian myself, but it's really that collaborative work, and I think the investment goes into creating this cross-disciplinary groups, learning a little bit of more technical language, for more technical people learning more about why it's so important that some nuances are preserved, for example. So I think those were big learnings, and I think that does take time as well. I think that's also very important to highlight. The payoff is amazing. I think, like you put it, it's like a dream come true to think about how these things can connect, and what kinds of questions we can pose, how we can enrich, how we can, the pieces are there. If you think about it, they were always there also in the provenance index, to think about how we can connect, and this provides also really multiple entry points to the data, not just, for example, the source document, but you can end that with a source document, but now you can learn, a little bit about buyer behavior, right? As something that might have been possible, of course, if you download all the provenance index data, put it somewhere else, do yourself your own cleaning and prepare it for your own research. But in modeling it this way, the vision is that it, it's not alone work, and it's there also for others to improve on. So.
We have a question from the chat about ULAN reference for collectors and dealers. How is this coordinated for GPI entries that are missing a ULAN code, either because the existing ULAN code hasn't been entered, or because ULAN has not referenced the collector or dealer?
Could be both. So it's, in perhaps also to your question of what it meant to work on this for a very long time, is this ongoing work of reconciliation also to ULAN. If you see GPI records from the legacy system, for us it looks very very clear. We can read all of it, but if you start extracting the pieces, the references to people, to groups, they are appearing everywhere in the data, even to previous owners of notes fields. So collecting all this information that eventually we want to reconcile to you, and then also brings the workflow of this work will contribute identities to ULAN, for example, because they don't have that, so we need to request ULAN identifiers. So all to say too that it's an ongoing work. If there is no ULAN identifier, it's because either it hasn't been entered or it doesn't exist, and we need to I guess request that, contribute that information to you, and so we can get that. And because of the scale now of the number of people and groups that we have identified, it becomes really also monumental work. So it's really important to hear from feedback from experts in the field. This data covers such a wide range and of geographic and historically too, that it does tap to the fact that there are really experts out there in certain collectors, in certain dealers, in certain periods of time or certain types of work. So that ongoing feedback loop is really important.
It's also funny that this is also due to this project that the provenance data is connected to the Getty vocabularies. One would think that's natural. If both is produced at the Getty, it will be connected, but it was not for a long time. The provenance index always contributed to ULAN, because where would they find the dealer names or the collector names? They come from the source documents that the provenance index was working on. So there was always a data dump towards the vocabularies, but it was not connected, the search was not connected with the vocabularies. And other things, like when I started, was funny that I cannot even imagine that you could not download any data from the provenance index. People were typing the things that they could see on their screen again in an Excel spreadsheet to do some data-driven analysis. So no, even connecting those resources is great. But are there any questions in the audience? Yeah.
Thank you. This is so exciting. This is a resource that I use in teaching all the time, and it's only going to get easier now. I know in the linked data world there are a lot of projects that reconcile their data against the Getty data because it's so good. But in linked data it goes the other way as well, right? There is always this problem about reconciling data that is uneven in terms of the quality. And so I was wondering what systems you put in place for managing stuff income, so to speak, that isn't as complete or as thorough as the Getty one.
Could you please repeat?
Okay.
Just what the question was for our online people.
In this world of linked data, how do you manage uneven qualities, I guess, of data, especially when you're linking? At the moment, we are linking, having ULAN, linking to the Getty vocabularies. I think now that we have the platform and the data structure and we can begin exploring how we could really bring our data together. I think the answer to your question, I think it's a question that we will start exploring really. Traditionally, I mean, going towards the future in terms of contributions to the provenance index, that's always been based on research projects and that do address specific gaps or specific strengths that need to be built for the databases. Like you're pointing out in this linked data world, then how can we also think about what's already out there and not always in terms of ingesting data? I don't have a good answer because I think we're just now at this point where we can start exploring really what it means. At the moment, we are not bringing to the ArchIS platform, say, even information from ULAN or Wikidata expressing it. Other systems like Geologs are doing that, and they have ways to to signal. We're not there yet, I guess. But thank you for your question.
Yeah.
I have a question regarding one of your very first slides in your presentation. So you showed the back of a painting full of all these labels, stamps, inscriptions, and so on, with a very rich provenance and all kinds of other transport and mobility, inventory numbers, and so on. Would it be possible to include this data into the index as well, and how would we do it?
Yeah, what I showed is our landing page for the new interface. It was a really interesting way to talk about provenance without talking about the images, in fact. So I think there have been over the years this same similar question, and it really even needs to kind of integrate, right, all that information from labels or also stamps. It would be, I think, as I think through how we might think about those kinds of sources, we would really need to think about how the current model of this event-based could be applied to what these labels are really describing. No, that would be really interesting exercise. And, I think this is another really wonderful area, that moment we are now, which is putting together the expertise, in terms of the modeling, the semantics, with experts on, that type of material, and also even people thinking about interfaces and thinking through how that could be applied. One of the things you'll notice now in the interfaces related to that, in terms of this linked art model, really uses a type of vocabulary that in some areas is meant to be even difficult for us, but maybe vague, because it needs to accommodate different types of, say, transfers of ownership. So and that ties into how thinking about this kind of other sources. It's possible too that could be modeled in a similar way in a platform. And now, because this is a linked data environment, that not everything needs to go to one database, and the interesting part would be to figure out how these pieces connect, so that you can actually put all this information together and then take it on to answer some questions.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, a different mindset now, because in the old days, when the Provenance Index was founded, it was kind of a centralizing information idea, and now it's a connecting, I guess, different resources. So it's decentralized more and more. We'll see what happens. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you so much for giving this overview of all these new functions, and also this overview of these 3 paintings made me really think about new possibilities of also doing something like big data visualizations. That's really exciting. And the question I was thinking of, since no one brought AI up yet to me, I was wondering if I will be able to use my favorite AI tool to prompt my research questions, or to do the research even for me. And if yes, how would that work technically? Is it through the data API? How would that work?
I haven't explored it yet myself, but it's yet one of these next step questions. Given the structure of the data, right, it should be like very natural now to think that we would be able to feed that structure and even think about how can that assist in constructing Sparkle queries, for example, or so I think there's right now a huge world of possibilities, for sure. There is technical documentation that I think it's good to have for this kind of training, and some data, and I mean, we're not the only ones thinking about this. So this is also very fertile ground to tap into who's interested in exploring this and see what can be done. I think it's very exciting. I mean, when this project was started, no one was talking about AI, and suddenly it's this kind of data modeling plus all this new thinking. So I think it's very exciting.
And this data harvested automatically by these large language models. What's the policy of the Getty? Do they want proactive have it in those models, or do they say no, we don't share it that way?
I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's being discussed now. What's the outward policy? But at least for Getty generally, open data is the policy, but I cannot speak to the exact right now how it's being formulated to the outwards. But
there's another way that I would think that AI can be used because you invested so much time and energy in kind of converting this data that was human readable into machine readable stuff. And I would hope that these possibilities would accelerate the way that we can transform data into structured data, possibly. There was another question.
You said that the inventories will be set to next year. The inventory.
The archival inventory. So the question is whether the archival inventories, it's one database of the Provenance Index, will become very soon too.
Is it separated or will it be part of one?
Yes, it will be part of one database, and that will allow to make all these connections across, same objects that are found in inventories all the way up to sales in the 18th, 19th century, particularly, and sometimes even in the stock books of dealers, which was always kind of also one of the big visions of the Provenance Index, and the reason why, right? It began with collecting inventories data and also in order to provide the sources to trace. So it does have that connection.
And I assume the reason why the inventories are last in this conversion project is because they are the most complicated ones. They are most difficult to understand, to make them machine readable, I would think, because sometimes the information is so unclear, so ambiguous, and how do you actually deal with it, would be my assumption.
I think, I'm trying to recall, I think we started the project with the most recent database, like the dealer stock books, to think about the assessment, the cleaning, how the modeling proceeded back, and archival inventories being the first data sets that's also contain the most legacy in terms of editorial decisions, how to capture things. It does seem to us at the beginning to potentially present also different cases or different challenges, including the fact that there are many more object types, for example. How do we maybe consider that? And the reason we are thinking, we decided to just release now what we had in terms of modeling is that all this idea of start exploring what this can do. You might recall I've given sometimes in the past presentations about what we're doing with the remodel. It was very difficult to convey what we were doing while we were still working on the data, and we didn't have really like anywhere on the other end to show and to start exploring. So, and with inventories, what we want to do is to think about also approach it as a way to help us, now that we have a platform, to be able to define what is the workflow within the department to really take in data that usually comes as CSVs or spreadsheets, and how we transform that, what the process is like, so that can also pave the way for new data, like I mentioned, other data sets that might be in the pipeline, or how might we approach the new projects. So yeah,
I guess we still have to give it some time to really see what it can do. I once asked in the yearly conference that we are doing, Dominic Oldman, who is also a big figure in linked open data. How do you convince leadership about linked open data? And he said, definitely not by talking about CDOC, CRM. And that's really the problem. We talk a lot about models and technological things, but we really have to see the power of it and how it transforms our field of research. And I think we still have to give it some time. Now that it is online, we have to see the use cases. But there has been also on social media and so on quite some criticism from people who have been used to the Provenance Index interface for many years, and some ones were really tough. Do you think you can convince them? Or, because, I mean, one of the driving forces indeed was, I think, to also allow for computational or data-driven research, especially for art market studies that we both are doing. And the traditional provenance researcher who just wants to retrieve one specific record, I think, is the one who is a little bit frustrated right now.
Yeah, no, and yeah, it's understandable. This is suddenly a new platform. Is very different. The data can look very different. It is the same data, however, but it's presented differently. It feels very fragmented. Not to some, it's difficult to piece it now, but it's the same data. The data is there. Getting at some now that we have the platform, getting at that those use cases, that because it's still possible, the data is there. In many ways might be the presentation layer of how to bring things together and what's possible within the tool or outside the tool. So working through, I think, those challenges with users, I think that's the next step. And certainly in the meantime, there's great feedback about really sometimes decisions about where to locate links so you know, the answers could come in many ways, and I think it's we're really looking forward to actually working together with long-standing users of the GPI, because it needs to continue working for them for sure. There are changes, and some things will need to change, of course, but I think it's this process of getting at those, and you know, that's why it's so important that we're running these systems in parallel. This is not this is one is off, the other one is on, and there's suddenly yeah, I think it's getting to know more about these users, trying to work out that, and hopefully there will be users that will also see, you know, how great it is to have these connections explicit, to be able to navigate the data in a way while still be able to access this one thing and you know, go in, go out, but seeing I think the potential of having this as a knowledge base, really. I think that's I'm very optimistic that we will you know, this is a process. It's a transitional process, and these modes of engagements of the community, that might be also a little bit of a different way of working now than it was, you know, with databases 10 to 20 years ago in some sectors. So I think
it's also a different way of the Getty approaching project, because I think some time ago they would only launch something that is completely finished, tested, and shouldn't be questioned. And now that to have this user engagement and taking in suggestions of how to move forward, I think is very worthwhile. On the other side, some people really are so used to books, and I was always kind of annoyed that for German sales, the provenance researchers go mostly to the digitized pages on the Heidelberg platform and not to the Provenance Index, which is much more structured data, because it's still looks like a book if you go to Heidelberg. It doesn't look like a book if you go to the Provenance Index. So I guess that's a different. Are there any other questions?
Yes.
going to do in the archives an advanced search that's really helpful for us.
Yes, I think there's a number of functionalities in archives that I think are not easy to spot or not self-evident. So we have I could show you there is a section for safe searches. So it's a very inconspicuous little button. The advanced searches can be pretty powerful. It just needs familiarity with how the fields or how things are named and structured. So we're putting together more and more documentation or examples on how to navigate that. So there's an advanced search functionality, a just kind of general search function. They can be combined. There's a way to.
So I plan to do that on the first page. I plan to link the advanced search on the first page, so you don't have to click around. That's the thing.
Oh, okay, thanks. I think that's great feedback. So maybe I can bring it back to the team.
Yes.
Any other questions? If not, then thanks again, Sandra, for giving us these insights into the latest version of the Getty Provenance Index. And thanks also to all people who joined us tonight online and here in the room. Thank you.
Thank you.